everybody, and welcome to the second episode of The Unicorner. So we're back this week, and we have a special guest with us today. This is Alain, and he is an elevated lifestyle coach as well. And Alain and I have dealt with anxiety and panic attacks, and we thought that we would like to chat today about our experiences with that and also what we do to kind of alleviate the symptoms that we have or to help us not feel so anxious and get to the panic attack level anymore. So, hello.
Hi, Deelle.
Welcome. You know what?
Thank you.
You're the first male that has ever stepped foot in this group, so welcome.
No pressure. No pressure.
Exactly. No pressure at all. So thank you so much.
Honored.
Yeah, good.
Right.
Awesome.
Special. All right. Yeah.
You are a special guy. So thank you so much for being here. And let's dive into this anxiety stuff. So
Okay. Can I start?
Yeah, I think we're going to start with what it is.
Cool.
Let's start there first.
Yeah. So the way I understand anxiety, the way that people experience it today, it's an overestimation of threat. And so then we develop this pattern of overestimating threat and basically end up fearing the next threat and the next threat. So you end up living in fear.
Yeah.
And today, because what that does is it activates our fight or flight system, which the fight or flight system has served us as humans very well for our survival. You know, if you can go back in history when we lived in tribes in the wilderness and there were like death threats, this fight or flight system would kick in and we would react accordingly to stay alive. But today the threats are not to our existence, but maybe a threat can be something that is potentially painful to us, or they're more. You can say that they're more minor threats, but our brain, our fight or flight system, doesn't recognize the degree of the threat. It doesn't recognize and so we react way too strongly to way too many minor threats, and so it strengthens this pattern of triggering the anxiety and. And it really gets out of balance really quickly and really easily, as you and I both know, and so many people in society kind of are victims of that, right?
Yeah, and you hear it more and more nowadays, right? Like our lives have become filled with all of this stuff, and people just seem to just be getting really, really overwhelmed with everything.
Yeah, you hear it in the language that people use too. So many people have kind of narrowed down their language to, oh my God, this makes me feel anxious. And sometimes I feel like a question like, are you really anxious, or are you just so used to labeling this emotion, this sensation as this is anxiety? And so I think that plays a role into us overestimating the minor threats that are out there as well.
Right, exactly. And the anxiety, I mean, you know, it's nervousness, it's fear, it's worrying, it's all of these apprehension, it's all of that kind of like wrapped up together in one big ball, basically. So, and I think it's kind of important for us to just kind of explain. You know, there are different types of anxiety disorders. So today we're going to be talking pretty much about the generalized anxiety disorder and panic attacks, but there are other things like post-traumatic stress disorder, OCD, panic attack, phobia. I already said panic attack, but phobias. But we're going to really touch on like the generalized anxiety disorder. But there are mild versions of that, but then there's the severe versions of that, which we know that can be extremely, extremely debilitating. So the generalized anxiety, it's worrying about life events, objects, situations, really feeling worried about your health, money, work, all those types of things. And the panic attacks are basically attack of intense terror and apprehension. That's the best way I can describe it, because that's kind of how, well, we know how that feels.
Yeah, exactly.
So causing like dizziness, shaky, confusion, nausea, difficulty breathing. You develop a whole wide range of symptoms in that case. So I just wanted to explain a little bit what we will be talking about today. So yeah, so there we go. Let's get into. Wanda commented, "Hi, Wanda. Thanks for watching. The biggest thing to me is learning coping skills." Yes, exactly.
We'll touch on that. We'll touch on that later. Yeah,
absolutely. So I think it's really important now for us to get into like the triggers, because the triggers have been really eye-opening for me, and I know for you, because once you can figure out kind of the triggers, it all starts kind of making sense, and you can go through, your brain doesn't get so jumbled anymore, I find.
Well, so. Yeah, it's then you can deal with the anxiety from a place of understanding, right? It's not just this mysterious thing that gets triggered and then followed by these intense emotions that can be, or sensations that can feel really crippling. Like once you understand the triggers, as we're going to talk about them, you can really you can observe them at work, and that in itself, that understanding of the triggers in itself, is a coping mechanism.
Right. Yeah. And I'm actually going, when we go through these triggers, I'm actually going to after the video is over, I'm going to go back and put the triggers above the video, so people will be able to go back and refer to those. So okay, so let's start with what would be number one?
So well, everyone, it's going to become obvious that they're kind of all linked together,
right?
In a way. So as we get through them, it's going to make more sense how they kind of work through one another, with one another. And but the first one is we have this like need to control. If you have a need to control, to always be in control, it kind of triggers, it means you have an intolerance for uncertainty, for not knowing. And so as soon as you feel like you lose control, then it triggers anxiety. So this can happen if people who lead very, very busy lives, if there's a lot going on, a lot of parents, I think can kind of have this, especially if you have kids and you have your career and just everything that you have in your life, and you want to feel like everything's in control, but there's so much that you need to control because there's so much happening. So it's easy to feel like you're losing grip, and it's this feeling of losing grip can trigger these anxiety patterns. Losing control can be interpreted by our brain as a minor threat. That it's,
Yes, and I can relate to that for sure. Being a parent, yes, absolutely. Just the combination of so many things. Yeah. You're right.
You can get into that when you share your experience. So did you want to talk about the second one?
Yeah, so the second one would be worrying. It becomes a productive problem-solving mechanism. So basically, you believe that thinking about it is actually going to change something, which is, again, can relate to that one too. So
yeah, exactly. It really creates this looping, these loops of thought patterns, and it's like it kind of comes along with the belief that an unconscious belief that the more I think about it, the better it will become. And so you start to think that everything can be solved in here, and no actions are actually taken to actually solve the problem.
Exactly.
And just the more you loop into those thought patterns, the worse the anxiety becomes, as we both know.
Oh, yes. Yeah, definitely. And well, I just want to say good morning, people. Hi, Laura. Hi, Wanda. Thanks for watching. And if anyone is watching the live video, if you go back and watch the video after it's over, feel free to still leave comments and we'll go back and answer them. So, sorry. Okay. So, next one.
The next one is, in psychology, known as catastrophizing. And what that is, it's basically creating the worst possible future scenario that you can imagine. And many people that I've talked to about this pattern of thinking kind of think that there's something wrong with them. They think they're like, am I just really negative because I always think of a negative outcome? And I think understanding this, where this catastrophizing pattern comes from, really helps. And it is rooted in our fight or flight system. And if you think about, like, in the primal days of humans, if you go back in early stages of evolution, when the fight or flight system again was used for our survival, and that's where catastrophizing is rooted. Let's say there was a saber-toothed tiger that was going to attack your tribe, and so the fight or flight system kicks in, and the catastrophizing in that case works in your favor, because you imagine the tiger jumping and attacking you. You kind of see your life flash before your eyes, and that's the worst case scenario, is death. So what do? You react accordingly, and you avoid death. So catastrophizing actually served us for our survival. But nowadays, that's still the mechanics of the fight or flight system are still the same. So we still will automatically jump to a one of the worst possible scenarios. But in today's world, like, death doesn't lurk around every corner. The threats are very minor. They're not threat to our survival, but that pattern still happens. So if you can understand that it's gonna happen and not try to resist it, like, if the fight or flight system kicks in, it's you will most likely think of a bad outcome first, but that's okay. If you know it's coming, you can be okay with it, and then just kind of be like, okay, well, that's my mind doing its thing, and realize that, is this really going to happen? What are the odds of this actually happening? Like, how often does the worst possible outcome actually happen? Well, not too often, So then you can just kind of reframe your thinking and in a way that's more conducive to realistic expectations of reality.
Yeah, and I think a lot of parents have this problem. I know I do, and I know we spoke about that before, where I get the flashes of the bad things happening, right? So if my son's outside playing on something, I get this flash of, like, the worst case scenario of him, like, falling and breaking his arm, or you just get these flashes of things. And after speaking with a lot of other mothers, and I know we spoke about this in another group one day, and there's a dad there that said that he actually had the same thing happen to him. And I'm like, okay, so this is a pretty common thing for many people, but I think parents especially.
Yeah, and it like in your case, the example you were giving, like, it just happens, right? Like, it's not like, and so once you observe it, and through this understanding that it's rooted in the fight or flight system, and it was created this way for our survival when we needed it to survive, then you can just be okay with it happening, and just be like, okay, like, it's happening again. And just kind of recreate the future scenario in your mind. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. So that kind of brings us, I guess, to kind of the next one. Yeah.
I think you relate to this one a lot.
Yeah, this one for sure. Unresolved emotions. So unresolved emotions that end up causing energy blockages in the system and your body. And so we'll be getting into our own personal struggles with anxiety, and I'll get into this in more detail at that point. But yeah, unresolved emotions for sure. Yeah,
and basically emotions are energy, right? Like emotions are energy in motion, and when you have unresolved emotions, you can think of them as, like, just bottled up or pent up energy that's just in your energy field, and it's just, like, stuck. So and so the energy cannot flow. Your energy field cannot flow as it should, and so that lack of flow and those blockages definitely trigger some sensations of anxiety. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, that's a big one for sure. All right, so the last one.
The last one, yeah, for anyone who's ever had a full-on panic attack like you and I both have, this one is like it's the ultimate, the last trigger. It's overemphasizing the physical symptoms. So when you experience anxiety, it comes with these physical symptoms that will vary from person to person. But like for me, I had a lot of tingling in the tip of my fingers when it got really bad, and you get like your heart beating really fast. Just maybe you'll sweat, or your brain kind of stops working. Because all the blood, when the fight or flight system kicks in, all the blood flows to your limbs, because it's like, all right, we're going to go, right? Your body's getting into fight or flight. So, but all of these physical symptoms can lead you to believe that if you give in to them, it leads you to believe that something's actually happening, something's wrong. And in both our cases, got pretty bad.
It's like a snowball effect, right? One little thought snowballs into all of these thoughts, and then your body physically starts reacting. So it physically starts changing. I too would get a lot of the tingly, like lose the feeling in my limbs. Like
and basically what we do in those kind of scenarios is, because we feel the anxiety physically, we think that if we focus on the physical symptoms, then that can help us alleviate the anxiety. So we're kind of like looking for a physical solution to a problem that's actually psychological.
Right.
So, but it's very big. So it makes us believe that there's actually something wrong happening.
Right.
Or with our body. Yeah.
Exactly. And we all know that we end up being fine afterwards. So even as debilitating as those symptoms can be, we're still here. We're still okay. So let's dive into what our personal experiences have been with anxiety and panic attacks. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your experience?
Well, the early stages of it all started with a very mild level of anxiety. And a lot of people just live life with this level of mild anxiety, and I was the same way. This was like 6 or 7 years ago when it first started, and because it was very mild and it was manageable, I was like, oh well, this is me. This is how I experience life now, and I'm just going to live with it. But then it progressively got worse and worse, and these thought patterns that triggered anxiety would show up more often, and then the anxiety would get a bit worse. And for me, there was a lot of confusing the worrying with actual problem solving. That was a big one, where I would get lost in my thoughts. I would get stuck in my head, and then that would lead into the catastrophizing, where if I was a university student at the time, and so I would feel anxious to go to class because of maybe what people may think of me, or just little silly things, right? And so I would picture myself going into class and maybe being made fun of, or really, or maybe just, I don't, it was very, very silly, but I would picture these terrible outcomes that never ever happened. But on my way to class in my car, I would feel anxiety because I would project myself into the future, into this worst possible outcome. And it's like if I was heading into a battle almost, if I was heading into this outcome that I was imagining in my mind, and it never played out like that. But this thought pattern was created, and so as soon as the thought pattern was triggered, it's like if I would expect this bad outcome to actually happen. And and then the tipping point for me was, there was this one night I was driving home, and my symptoms had gotten bad to the point where I was getting new physical symptoms that I hadn't had before, the tingling in the fingers and stuff. Never used to show up. It used to just be I feel it in my gut and I just feel nervous. And my heart would beat a little bit, and it was very manageable. But as soon as I started having these physical symptoms, and the tip of my fingers went numb, and it would like, I felt those sensations go off my arms, and then so I was in my car driving home, and it got out of hand, and I gave into those physical symptoms, and so I had to pull over because it was getting like, my breathing was very, very shallow. The tip of my fingers got like, my whole hand started cramping. Actually, my face started cramping, and because I gave into them so much, like I actually thought I was gonna go. I thought I was dying. Like I actually had to accept. I was like, this may be it. It was very, very scary, and I was just in my car on the side of the road. So I pulled out my phone and I actually called the ambulance. I had a hard time calling the ambulance because I could barely hold my phone. It was, but it's funny because in my mind, I knew I had anxiety up until that point, but in my mind, I was like, there's no way this is a panic attack. Like, this feels like death. And it was, as soon as I knew help was coming though, and as soon as I knew the ambulance was coming, and I hopped into the ambulance and we drove, like everything was good because I felt safe. I felt like I knew I wasn't going to die. But then that I was prone to those kinds of panic attacks. So every time I would get into my car, which I had to get to my car a lot, like I had to battle these physical symptoms that would get triggered automatically, and it was very crippling. So then that's where I learned coping methods, but we can get into those here. So why don't you share your experience?
Yeah, I will. Ashley says this is crazy. What he's describing happening to him in the car is exactly what happened to me twice last week. So yeah. Hi Ashley, thanks for watching. Yeah. It's scary stuff.
Well, yeah, sure. I'll get into, we'll talk about like how we overcame it, because like to this day, this happened like 6 or 7 years ago, but to this day I don't feel anxiety anymore. Like you can heal yourself.
You can, yeah. So I guess I'm going to go through my experience as well, and I'm just going to go through kind of the triggers that we spoke about as well, and my experience going through each of those triggers, because like we said, they're all connected
in some way. Yeah.
In some way, yeah. So the first thing for me was really the unresolved emotions. That was really, really big for me, because I had a lot of unresolved emotions about not feeling good enough as a child, and then I had a death of a child, and and I pushed those things back as far as they could go in my brain, to the point where I didn't think about it. I used drugs and alcohol to kind of numb the pain of all of that. Yeah. So there's a lot of the unresolved emotions with that. And then the need to control everything. So I felt like I was losing control. And after I actually had my son, it got kind of worse, where I felt, like being a parent and being a new parent and suffering from a bit of postpartum depression, I was kind of like just all over the place, really feeling like I was losing control.
Did you feel that like once you got your son, like there was more that you had to have control of, and so that made you feel like you were losing control of more things now, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it was just, again, those unresolved issues, right, that had never been dealt with, and that combined with this now. And I really felt like I was losing control too, when I was turning to the drugs and alcohol and all that stuff, obviously. And then and then kind of getting over that, but then having my son, and then just feeling really like I was losing control over even my identity. As weird as that sounds, because when you transition from just being a woman and now you're a mom, there's a lot of feelings of losing your identity that go along with that. So really, yeah.
So that's actually an example of something that you can perceive as a threat, because losing your identity can be associated with potential pain in the future of like totally like, who am I, and like so.
Right.
So that period where you felt like you were losing your identity,
fearful.
Fearful, exactly. Triggers
Yep.
fear, triggers the anxiety patterns. Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So then you kind of get into the worrying is becoming problem solving. So I mean, I've always been a worry wart for sure. I've always been like that my entire life, but it really intensified as my son was born, and then that leads into the I can't even pronounce this word. What's the word? Catastrophizing? Catastrophizing.
Yeah.
So when I'm thinking the worst case scenario, so now here I'm becoming a mom. I have these flashes of like the worst case scenario happening at all times with my son when he's doing anything. And just, having a child that had died, that's even intensified even more, right? So you really want to make sure that you keep the child that you have here alive and safe. So it's really like worrying about that type of stuff. So the combination of all of that got me to a boiling point. And that's when full-blown panic attack mode happened. So I was going to bed. My husband and I were going to bed, and our son, he was asleep. He was a baby then. And then it just snowballed. I lost all the feeling in my arms and my legs. I couldn't breathe. My heart was racing so fast that I literally felt like I was going to die because there was no way that my heart could continue beating that way. It was beating so fast and so loud in my ears. I actually got my husband to call 911, like I was almost fainting, and then I was convulsing. So completely on a chair, convulsing. And so the ambulance came and they took me away to the hospital, and then I was still not feeling the greatest on the way there, but then when I got to the hospital, like things started to kind of calm down a little bit. And then again, after that, I was kind of prone to them, because when you go through that much worry about dying, because that's what you feel like you are going to die. When you start to get a little bit anxious and then you start to feel those symptoms again, like the tingly fingers, then you go, uh-oh. And then it starts snowballing, and then you start to kind of go into that panic attack mode again. So it's like,
and it's at
very,
that point,
very scary.
It's at that point that the overemphasizing of once that pattern of actually going into a panic attack is created, that's when the overemphasizing of the physical symptoms is at its peak. It becomes a very sensitive situation.
And this is the thing with our brain. Our brain doesn't recognize the difference between our thought and actual action, right? So in that moment, when you feel like you're dying, you feel like you're dying.
Yeah.
And it becomes a very life-changing moment when you're faced with that. And it's kind of like almost like the rock bottom, I guess, that people kind of have. So that's your wake-up call that, look, something is really, really, really going wrong here. There's something that's not being addressed. You really have to start taking the time to work on yourself. And that's really what we're going to get into here. But, it was kind of the thing. There was a lesson in it, in a sense, right? Because if we didn't go through that, we wouldn't be here right now talking about what we're talking about. So that was kind of our wake-up call to open our mind to something greater.
Yeah, and so before we get into talk about some coping skills, or I'd prefer to call them healing techniques, because it's not about learning to cope, because our natural state is not a state of anxiety. And the message that I want to share with as many people as possible regarding anxiety is don't wait until it's too late. Don't wait until the panic, you're in actual full-on panic mode, and don't let that be your cue that you need healing. If you experience mild levels of anxiety, apply some of the healing techniques, really make them habit in your life, and changes happen way, way, way faster than you could ever imagine.
Yeah, and Ashley says she said she tried driving yesterday and it happened again. I think I'm having fear that now when I drive, I'm in danger. So she can't wait to hear your tips for getting out of it. So see, like you
Right.
mentioned before, it's like being back in that situation again,
Mm-hmm.
driving. That brings about the feelings like, oh my God, is that going to happen again? Oh, it happened
Right.
when I drove last time. So there's the snowball effect. There's the overemphasis of the physical symptoms that
Mm-hmm.
just kind of snowball. So, yeah. So,
Should we start with let's start with meditation as the first,
yeah,
because then
yeah,
I'll talk about my personal experience, and so
yeah.
when I was at, I call it my rock bottom in my life, like that.
Mhm.
Yeah, the car. Yeah,
Oh,
that's
yes,
the car can
definitely.
be triggered for me too.
And you know what? Mine actually has been triggered in a car as well. Because I remember I would have to be driving with people going away. I could coach track and field and would be going away for track and field and having like somebody else drive. And yeah, it just started like a snowball. So yeah, it's
Hmm.
kind of interesting that it's car related for a lot of us.
Yeah, and actually, I have a few friends that have a very very similar stories as mine, and yeah. So when I was
Yeah.
at that point in my life, and like I wanted to be healed, like I couldn't function anymore, and like I remember, really, I lived with my parents at the time, and I cried to my parents. I was like, I just want to be me again. Like I just want to live
Mm.
life. Like what's going on? And then I like stumbled upon this book. I think this book found me more than I found it.
Yeah.
And it talked about meditation and like the East, like more like Eastern philosophy of like Buddhism, and how to calm the mind, and also talked about like the Western, like some more scientific perspective on like neuroplasticity, and how by training your mind you can change your brain, and that was actually the title of the book. It's
Oh, really?
train your mind, change your brain. Yeah,
Change your mind, change your brain. Cool.
train your mind. Yeah,
Oh, train your mind.
train
Okay.
your
Yeah.
mind, so that learning how to um, have a better relationship with your thoughts can actually rewire your brain, and
Yes.
create new patterns that are conducive to not living in fear. And so the technique there's many different ways to meditate, and like essentially what you do when you meditate, you train yourself to focus more and more and more, and you want to focus, kind of experience a better quality of focus, and then bring that into your life. So there's one of the most popular techniques to start to learn meditation is to count your breath, because you want to focus.
Mm, yes.
You want to bring your focus on your breath. You want the breath to be the focal, like the anchor point for your focus. And so you can do many different counting techniques. Like I find counting down really helps, because
Yeah.
you're working towards a goal. So it brings,
Me
like, you
too.
want to get from 50 to 0. But the thing that I kind of had like a bit of a variation of like the counting down that really, really works for me, where I would start at 100, and the point was not to get to 0. The point was so I would go like 100, and then 99, and then a thought would come up, because that's what the mind does.
Yeah.
The mind produces thoughts. So a thought would come up, and then if I got distracted by the thought, I had to restart it at 100. And so
Uh-huh.
it was this loop of so I would go 100, 99, 98. Oh, I'm getting distracted by this thought, I have to restart. And it was very frustrating
Mm,
at first, because I was just like counting down like 2, 3, 4 breaths, and then
right.
restarting. But even if I did that for 5 minutes, and I did that like several times a day, even
Mm-hmm.
if I didn't achieve like very like deep relaxed states of mind at the start. But
Mm-hmm.
even if I just engaged in that battle, so to speak, of like counting down, being distracted, restarting, and just like kind of feeding that loop, just being
Yeah.
engaged in that, I've got the benefits of meditation.
Absolutely.
I would snap out of it, go on with my day, and my mind would be just a little bit calmer than it
Mm-hmm.
was. And
Yeah.
so I felt like I was it was incremental, but I felt like I was winning the battle. And I felt like,
Right.
so I was like, And so I actually went to see a psychologist once. It was after I started meditating a little bit, and I was still very, very anxious, but I had a bit of control over it. And so she did her thing. I forget exactly how it went. She asked all these questions, and like she wanted to know my triggers and all that. And at the end, she asked me if I had anything to add to our conversation, and I almost did. I was like, should I tell her? Should I not? I was just like, I was like, well, I've been kind of experimenting with like meditation. Like I was like so new to it. I was like very uncomfortable even talking about it. And then as soon as I said that, her eyes kind of lit up, and she was like, what she told me changed my life. She said, you have to realize that the state of mind that you work towards when you meditate is the exact opposite of the one that you are in when you're anxious.
Right.
And I was just like, really?
Yeah.
Okay. So that
so
confirmed that what I had been doing was the right thing, and that I was really reversing the anxiety. And then soon enough, doing this technique really worked for me. And soon enough, I could count down from 100 to like 90 or 89 because my focus was so pure and strong that my mind would eventually just like stop trying to distract me, and then I would fall into this super deep relaxation, and then I remembered what the psychologist told me, that that's the state of mind I need to cultivate in order to reverse the anxiety. So as soon as I was in that state, I was like, this is my medicine. This deep relaxed state was my medicine, and I gave myself the medicine I needed as often as I needed it. And,
it's powerful stuff.
That was how I first, took my power back.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I mean, there's so much studies now about the benefits of meditation. You know, how it even builds a bigger and healthier brain. So it actually increases the gray matter in our brain. It actually can control our brain chemicals as well. So serotonin and GABA, and reduces cortisol. Like these are actually studies that are confirming the changes that can take place in the brain due to meditation. And I think I also do that as well. I do the count backwards. So if I'm in an anxious state, I start to count backwards. There's a couple other little tips that I do as well. I pinch kind of the pressure points within my hands. So if I'm sitting there and I just close my eyes and kind of do my counting backwards, I squeeze the pressure points within my hand, which I find, I don't know, to be very helpful. I can't tell you scientifically what that means, but for some reason, for me, it's almost like taking myself out of my brain, I guess.
Right.
Out of the thought.
And more so into your body. And so I feel like that probably has a certain like grounding effect for you.
Yes, grounding, absolutely. And I also have, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to add that, like, when you're in your brain, when you're stuck in your mind and you're in all these, like, anxiety thought patterns kind of, and all these looping thoughts and stuff, like, you're not grounded. You are very, very ungrounded. So anything that can help you ground yourself is going to be really like beneficial.
Right. And I'm glad that you mentioned that, because grounding for me is taking a step outside into nature as well. So there was one experience that I was having with kind of getting in like that panic mode. And oh my gosh, it was so scary again. I was in my car like you, and just, things just started to get really crazy again, and the heart racing. And I actually pulled the car over and I got outside. And then in another situation, I was at home and I was getting into that panic state again. And I went outside, and just being outside and just doing the counting backwards, closing the eyes, touch the pressure points within the hand, it takes me back out of that. So I'm glad that you mentioned grounding, because nature is super important for that as well. So going into nature is something that has been very, very helpful for me as well. I think it's also important. Do you have anything to add to that, nature-wise?
Well, maybe just like that. like we are nature, right? Our bodies are nature,
Yeah.
and just to kind of emphasize the importance of connecting with nature is that like it's so easy to get disconnected from nature, especially if you live in the city, right? So, um,
Hmm.
so
Yeah.
yeah, very important to go connect back with
Yes,
where we're
absolutely.
essentially from. So yeah.
And another thing, another little tip that I was doing as well, especially if I was driving in the car with someone else driving, I would have like a little like stone, and it was just really really smooth, and I would just keep it in my pocket. So if I felt like I was getting anxious again, I would just kind of like rub the stone. So it was
Hmm.
kind of, I mean, in one sense, it's kind of grounding because it's stone from outside, but at the same time, it was just getting me out of my brain again.
Yeah, yeah, and that's a
So
big thing.
yeah, so those are a couple. Ashley says, the ocean does it for me. Yeah,
Mm,
exactly. And if you can actually combine being in nature and meditating at the same
yeah,
time, like,
so beautiful.
so beautiful, absolutely. And the thing is, it does work, and it's just to consistently do it. But with the meditation, some people get really worried about the meditation because they feel like they're not doing it correctly, and
Right,
they're
yeah.
not, obviously meditating for a longer period of time is beneficial, absolutely. But when we're starting, don't get caught up in, because there you go, you could be worrying about doing it wrong, right? You don't want to be worrying about it. You just want to start small and do, even if it's 2 minutes. I mean, that has
Hmm.
even been scientifically proven to be beneficial within 2 to 10
Right,
minutes. So just take the 2 minutes and just focus on the breathing, and just consistently add that into your day. It obviously has to be something that will fit into your lifestyle, right? Because it's something that well, it's something that everyone, if you are suffering with anxiety, it should kind of be priority on the list, wouldn't you say?
well, yeah, like I refer to it as my medicine.
Mm-hmm.
um
Mm-hmm.
when you go, and a lot of people are on meds, and their medicine is taking a pill, and then that goes and instantly changes the brain chemistry into one that's more conducive to relaxed states and stuff. But meditation can be just that for you. Meditation, and I'm just gonna share, like, I love this definition of meditation. It's like meditation is essentially staying focused in a state of boredom. So what you want to do is just to cultivate the best quality of focus that you can,
Mm-hmm.
and so you can't fail. The only way that you can fail is if you don't do it.
Yeah, exactly.
So, like, if you don't
Yeah.
do it, you're failing at meditation. But other than that,
Right.
um, um, actually, I was teaching meditation to my mother, and she came back a week later after she was experimenting with it for a week, and she was like, she's like, I suck, I can't do it. it's like
Yeah.
it's like, hey, tell me more about that. And she's like, she had this idea that she had to be in this very zen state of mind for the whole time, otherwise it
Mhm.
wasn't meditation. And once she realized what meditation wasn't, it wasn't all of it wasn't it's not
Mm.
anything more than just focusing on your breath, so that you kind of create a better relationship with your thoughts, so that you kind of get
Right.
out of your mind and into your body, but just by focusing on your breath. And it takes a lot of refocusing on the breath and refocusing on the
Right.
breath, and because your thoughts are going to distract you, and then so you
Right.
refocus on the breath. And if you if
Yeah.
you if you're new and you're to do that for a week, like a couple times a day for a week, just to go, and whatever way you can, technique you want to use to refocus on your breath and refocus on
Yeah.
the breath, you will get to the point very quickly where you feel like I call it like the mind gives up. Like your focus
Yeah.
is so strong on your breath that the mind's just like, okay, fine, I'll take a break, and it just stops
Right.
trying to distract you, and that's when you enter into the very deep state of relaxation. But
Right.
um,
And that comes, right? It's just consistency.
yeah,
And yeah, just not, you're right, not worrying about doing it incorrectly. But like your mom said, she says that she sucks. Like you hear that so often, right?
Yeah.
From our clients, and it's just like,
Hmm.
well, it's not supposed to be about putting so much judgment on yourself
Yeah.
for it, right? It's not supposed to be about that. It really is just the focusing
Just
on the
cultivating
breath.
focus. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. That's it, because we're not going to be able to shut our brain off,
Hmm.
right? People think, well, I can't just sit there and not think. And it's like, well, it's not about that. It's about recognizing and understanding that the thoughts are there and just recognizing them for what they are and letting them go. That's
Yeah.
it.
The no thinking, the no mind state, as they call it in Buddhism, comes with a repetitive, like, refocus on the breath,
Yeah,
refocus on the breath, refocus on the breath, and eventually the mind gives up, and that's when the thinking stops, and
right,
that just comes with regular practice. Um,
right. Absolutely.
should I talk about CBT a little bit?
Yeah, before we do that, I also just wanted to mention too that sometimes meditation can actually make somebody who is anxious feel a little bit more anxious.
Hmm.
So that is a thing that can happen. I know you've experienced that a little bit, and I'll let you touch on that in a second. But
Yeah.
so when if that happens to you, if meditation makes you feel a little bit more anxious, there's also other types of meditation that you can take part in, which are more movement based. So things like yoga, tai chi, qigong, and even walking
If
slowly
you,
in nature,
if
right?
slowly, exactly. If you go
Yeah,
walk
slowly.
very, very slowly, and focus on the breath, and you
Right,
just so you take a walk with the intention of focusing on your breath,
right.
but you're moving at the same time. Yeah, for me, when I first started, I want to say maybe in the first like couple of weeks when I first started to achieve very relaxed states. As soon as
Mm-hmm.
I achieved like the no mind state, um, because it was new, it was foreign. Um,
Mm,
the anxiety kind of kicked in a little bit, and it was like, is it okay that I'm feeling this relaxed? And like, or like, why isn't my mind producing thoughts anymore? Like, I'm so
yeah.
used to thinking, and I'm not thinking right now. Is everything okay? And then it's just like, okay, well,
And then you
let's
start thinking, right?
refocus on the breath now. And it's yeah,
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. So that is a thing, right? So we just want people to be kind of aware of that happening.
it can happen until because it's something new until you get really used to it. Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, why don't we talk a little bit about CBT or cognitive
CBT.
behavior therapy? So, yeah,
Yeah.
go ahead, tell me.
Well, CBT, like for people, if you go see a psychologist, and this is like the go-to psychotherapy method or treatment for anxiety, and it's used for depression and many other mental disease or imbalances.
Hmm.
And it's a goal and action oriented form of psychotherapy with basically the idea is to develop alternative ways of thinking that are more conducive to relaxed state of mind. So basically, like your true self, your true way of being.
Hmm.
So you want to develop new thought patterns that eventually override the old thought patterns that trigger the anxiety. And
Right.
it happens in, so I'll use the example of the car.
Hmm.
For me, I, when I would get into, I kind of, the reason why we talked about CBT after meditation is because meditation really heals your relationship with your thoughts.
Right.
And for me, I didn't know about CBT. I only knew about meditation. But once I found out what CBT was, I realized that just by having a better relationship with my thoughts and practicing meditation, I
Hmm.
would automatically practice CBT techniques
Yeah.
because it just intuitively made sense for me for my healing. So I would get into my car, and I needed to go to university, so I would get into my car and start to feel the triggers, and then I would kind of rationalize, like, okay, like how many times have I gotten into my car before where I did
Mm,
not have a panic attack? And so you start
right.
to challenge the old way of thinking. It's just like, well,
Right.
I can't even count how many times I've been in my car and I've never had a panic attack. How many times have I
Yeah.
had a panic attack? Well, at that point, it was like once. And so then you ask yourself, like, is it safe for me to get into my car? Well, of course it's
Hmm.
safe for me to get into my car. Okay. So I'm
Yeah.
getting into my car, and it's safe for me to get into my car. I'm good. And it's just kind of, you challenge the old ways of thinking, and then that paired with meditation really work well together. And the action part of it is, you have to, like you set yourself the goal of, well, I want to be able to get into my car and not experience anxiety. So you need to take action towards that. So you take action to support the new thoughts, the new thought patterns. So the new thought pattern is, well, it's clearly safe for me to get into my car. I will not have a panic attack if I get into my car, because most of the time it doesn't happen. So the action that follows and supports that is, I'm going to get into my car. And maybe I'll just go drive around the block, just to prove to myself that my car is not dangerous. And so you kind of just like go along with that. And so once you have that drive around the block with no panic attack, no anxiety, or the panic attack hasn't been triggered, then you have that in your memory. You have that to refer back to.
Right.
The next time when you want to go for a longer drive, you can be like, well, last time I was in my car, everything went well. I drove around the block. I did not have a panic attack. I was everything was under control. Everything was good. So it is safe for me to go for a longer drive now. And then even when you're in your car, practice breathing as well. Right. And really just strengthen, with your behavior, you strengthen these new thought patterns that eventually override the old ones. Yeah,
exactly. I mean, it's actually like always changing like the neural pathways in the brain. Like it can, that's a thing. We can do that.
Exactly. Right? And yeah, that's neuroplasticity right there. That's the title of the book, is like, train your mind, change your brain. And it's crazy to think that that's how neuroplasticity happens, is by just mental training. Just by training your mind, you actually can change the physical structure of your brain. And that's fascinating, and that's powerful, right? Like,
absolutely.
You want to tap into that power, that potential.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess kind of what people can take away from today, just kind of the steps of things that can help. If you're taking medication or something, we're not saying like stop your medication, right, or anything like that. But it's
absolutely not.
Definitely something that if you are working with a doctor, something that you can chat about, being able to bring that mindfulness practice into your life, like the meditation. If you're working with a psychologist, you're probably already doing the cognitive behavior therapy, but yeah, just talk about bringing the meditation in, and again, just starting really slowly.
Yeah.
And kind of working your way up. And I know in a lot of our videos, we're always talking about meditation, but it's just so powerful. It really, really is. And it can help on so many levels.
And I think a big reason why it is so powerful is because it does it allows us to reconnect with who we really are, with our true essence. Like, we are not our thoughts. We are not our minds. We are who we are truly is the observer, or the one who experiences our thoughts and our mind. And but if you're always stuck in your mind, you live in your mind, and you're so identified with your thoughts, you start to believe that that's you, and that's the only way of experiencing life. So when you practice meditation regularly, and that's very important, you really have to make it a habit. It has to be at least once a day. In the morning's the best time, in my opinion, and 2 or 3 times a day for 5 minutes is going to bring a lot of healing for these kinds of things. Go ahead. So
no, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. No, I was just thinking, even if you're a passenger in the car and you're driving in the car, and you can just like stare out the window and focus on your breath, like that is a form of meditation.
Yeah.
Right.
There's just something I want to add when you talked about not like if you are taking meds, like start meditating and just build your own practice with the meditation, so that you can start to experience the results for yourself. And once you connect with your own practice, you will feel what it does for you, and you will know how to use it to heal yourself. And I have a client that we're at the end of working 3 months together, and she came when we first met. She had anxiety, and she had just stopped taking meds like a couple of weeks before we met, and she had been on meds for 10 years, and but she also had a limiting belief that like meditation was not for her. And I was like, okay, well, let's dive into that. And and she connected, like she was just so ready for to build her meditation practice that she connected with it so much. And she came back to me the next week, and she's like, well, you taught me like this way. Like I taught her that countdown that I did, where I restarted every time I got distracted. And she's like, that frustrates me. I can't do that. Restarting I don't like that. So she's like, but this is what works for me. Then I was like, she told me like everything, the way she meditated now. I was like, wait. I thought you didn't know how to meditate. And she's like,
yeah.
Like, so it's just find your own way.
It's your own way. Yeah. It's just taking that time, right? And I mean, it's the biggest sacrifice that we can give is our time. And universally,
and focus,
right. So universally, if you're willing to sacrifice your time, the universe is going to repay you greatly for that. So, and I always like to talk about our youth self-development program, where we teach mindfulness and meditation to kids.
Yes.
And I like giving this example because it's so powerful to be able to see the change that meditation can have in people, and especially when it's kids. So at the beginning of the 6-week program, we sit there and we try to get them to sit there for like 3 minutes. And they're fidgety and they're moving all over the place. They can't sit still at all. They're giggling, they can't focus whatsoever, because we're talking about kids like grades 1 to 5, right? So it's hard for them to focus. But at the end of the 6 weeks, we can do it for 10 minutes, and they just sit there or lay there, whatever's comfortable for them. We tell them, pick whatever way is comfortable for you, and they can do it. No problem.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Like, with no, like they're not fidgety. They're not like, they're focused, and kids, right? So if you take the time, the benefits can happen really, really quickly, because we were doing this once a week for 6 weeks. And that's
they progress that fast. Yeah. And I like when you say, like, it's so important, the point that when you say start small, and because that's how you did it with the kids. That's how when I coach on meditation, like it's not like, okay, let's do it for, like in Buddhism, they say everyone should sit in meditation for 20 minutes. If you don't have time, you should do it for an hour.
Yeah, I love that.
And like, it can be a bit more, we live such busy lives that it can be a bit more intimidating to be like, okay, I need to find 20 minutes. And no, you need to find 5 minutes. But then what you're going to find is that 5 minutes is not going to be enough.
Exactly.
Eventually. And then so next thing you know, you're doing it for 7 or 8 minutes, because at the 5-minute mark, you're like just getting into deep relaxation. So next thing you know, you're doing it for 10, and then next thing you know, you're doing it for 20 minutes, and it feels like 5 minutes because it just comes so natural. So
absolutely. Yeah. And Katrin just said, hi Katrin, by the way, thanks for watching. Someone once gave me this quote: there's nothing more destructive than the untrained mind. Absolutely. Also very helpful is pranayama, or breathing techniques. Like, I don't even know how to pronounce that. Anyways, kids are awesome with trained breath techniques, as they have no preconceived notions. I will look for this book that was mentioned, Train Your Mind, Change Your Brain. Another good one is The Dance of Fear by Harriet Lerner. Wow, thanks for that, Katrin.
There's so many books, so many resources out there, right? Like that.
Absolutely.
honestly, the Train Your Mind, Change Your Brain, like it's a bit of a scientific read because it goes into explaining a lot about neuroplasticity and like, it, if you want to understand what happens on on the brain, like the brain level when you do meditate, then it's a great book, but not a necessary read to learn meditations for sure.
Yeah.
Oh, Ujjayi.
Ujjayi. Thank you. I'm terrible with pronouncing things.
Yeah,
Thank you.
We practice that. They practice that in yoga.
Yeah, awesome.
Where you constrict your throat.
Oh, and that's what. Okay.
Yeah, and it's great for detoxifying the body as well.
Nice.
And because of the sound associated with the constricting of the throat, you hear the air. It's like an audible anchor for your to focus on the breath as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Oh, yeah. I've learned something new today. Thank you. That's awesome.
Look at that.
So we're at 10 o'clock. Yeah. Is there anything else you wanted to add, Alain, before we go?
No, just meditation. And once you do connect with your meditation practice, you will see that it becomes much more easy to challenge your thoughts. And the CBT part of it should come pretty natural because the thoughts that you are challenging are pretty irrational to begin with.
Right.
And they're all rooted in fear. And we are not meant to live our lives in fear. The goal is to live in love.
Yes. I love that. And absolutely. And, use these feelings that your body is giving you almost as a wake-up call for something that's going on much deeper, right? Use it for that. Use it for the wake-up call that you need to kind of make changes in your life and go a little deeper and figure out what's really going on. So Stephanie said, Deelle, you've inspired me to remember to include my daughter in my meditation journey. It's improved my life so much, and I don't know how I overlooked including her in the beginning. Well,
that's beautiful.
You're starting. That is amazing. I'm so glad that I've inspired you to do that. Yeah, definitely add her to the mix because it can help everyone, really. It's very, very powerful. So
just one last thing too, that there's so many people like that live life with mild levels of anxiety, and we all know people, and like people are pretty open, like you know, to talk about it and stuff. So for those of you who end up watching this and who do connect with their own meditation practice and then teach it to others. Teach it to others because and teach it through your own experience, because for one, as you teach it to others, you strengthen your practice by doing that. And you're just making the world a better place. You're letting them know that there's another way to experience life other than in a low level fear. So
absolutely.
So just to spread the message of meditation. Yeah.
Spread the love, right? Spread the love. So thank you so much for being here today and chatting about this stuff. It's been a really important conversation to have, that's for sure. Yeah. So thank you. And
thanks for having me.
No problem. And I just want to let people know we do videos like this in the group every week. So, if you have friends that want to come on in, just invite them to join the group, and they can have access to these helpful videos. And anyone that's watching the replay of this, feel free to write comments in the comment section, and I will respond to everything. And Nicole said, thank you. It's always nice to know we're not alone when dealing with anxiety.
Yeah.
So on that note, absolutely, you're never alone, and there's many people dealing with the same thing. So we all have to stick together.
Yeah.
Right? Support.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thanks again, Alain, for being here. And thank you, everybody, for watching. Much love to you all. Thank you for being in this group. We appreciate it so much. And have a great Friday. Have a great weekend, everybody. See ya.
Bye.